Hey guys, my name is JC and today we're calling upon every tribe in Magic with the Ur-Dragon at the helm. This deck utilises changelings and the very best tribal lords to generate value and establish a combat-based board state to finish our opponents with. Let's see if Tribal has what it takes to earn our opponents' respect. Okay, let's see who we're playing today. We have the Ur-Dragon, we have Norin the Wary, and we have Marisi, Breaker of the Coil. Well, this would be interesting to see if this Ur-Dragon deck is actually a proper dragon deck or if it's a tribal deck like ours. Now, if we have a look at our opening hands, we do have a few changelings, quite a few lands, no tribal lord, but I think we can keep this. And we start by drawing an Ingenious Infiltrator. Well, there's one of our tribal lords already. So let's get our Flooded Strand into play. We'll crack that. We'll put into play our Godless Shrine. And we will pay the 2 life because we're going to get down our Imposter of the 6 Pride. And then we'll pass the turn. The Ur-Dragon just starts with a tapped land and passes the turn there. Norin plays a land. And they just leave it there. Marisi plays their land for turn, and it's a Mosswort Bridge, so it does have Hideaway 4. So when this land enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of your library, exile one of them face down, then put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. And if they pay green and tap it, they can play the exiled card without paying its mana cost if creatures they control have power 10 or greater. But that's it for them. We draw a Guardian Gladewalker for turn. So I think we'll start by playing our Secluded Glen for turn. We'll reveal our Changeling. That allows it to come into play untapped. Then we're going to move to combat. We'll swing in at the Marisi player. Now we'll activate Ninjutsu. That goes through, that triggers our Ingenious Infiltrator. We draw a card and we get an Irregular Cohort. And that's going to be us for turn. The Ur-Dragon plays a tap land. And that's it for them. Norin plays a land, notably a Nykthos. And then they cast their commander, Norin the Wary. Norin says, whenever a player casts a spell or a creature attacks, exile Norin the Wary, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. And that's it for them. Marisi plays a land. And now they cast a Swiftfoot Boots. That triggers Norin, it goes to exile. Marisi ends the turn there, and that also triggers Norin, so it returns to the battlefield. And that's it for them. We draw a Bloodline Pretender. So we have no shortage of changelings at the moment, that's for sure. Well, we'll move to combat first. This time we'll swing at the Norin player. That triggers Norin, it goes to exile. And damage goes through, we draw a card. We get an Amoeboid Changeling. Alright, so I think what I'll do here is I'll play our Stomping Ground for turn. We will pay the 2 life. Then we're going to cast our Bloodline Pretender. We'll name Dragon as our creature type. Then we'll get back down our Imposter of the 6 Pride. That will trigger our Bloodline Pretender and it gets a +1/+1 counter. And that's going to be us done. Norin returns to the battlefield at our end step. The Ur-Dragon plays a land. And now they cast a Venomous Changeling. Alright, I think we might have a mirror match here for Tribal. That triggers Norin. It also triggers their Path of Ancestry land. Then they move to their end step. Norin returns to the battlefield. And we move to the Norin player's turn. Norin plays a land. And now they cast a Sculpt in Steel, which triggers their commander. When it ETBs, it can enter the battlefield as a copy of any artifact. And it comes in as a copy of the Bloodline Pretender. They name Human as the creature type. And then they move to their end step. With Norin returning to the battlefield. Now that does trigger Bloodline Pretender. So that's a nice little synergy that they've got there thanks to our Bloodline Pretender. And that's it for them. So sad to say, but I think their Bloodline Pretender is actually going to get bigger than ours with the amount that Norin triggers. So our only good combats when we get to our turn is probably going to be against the Marisi player. Now Marisi starts by playing a land for turn. And then they cast a Pest Infestation targeting our Bloodline Pretender. Destroy up to X target artifacts or enchantments. Create twice XX 1/1 black and green pest creature tokens with, when this creature dies, you gain a life. That triggers Norin, it goes to exile. We lose our Bloodline Pretender. They get 2 blockers, which is quite relevant now. So unfortunately, it looks like we're not going to be probably drawing cards with our Ninja. And then on their end step, Norin returns to the battlefield. That triggers Bloodline Pretender. It becomes a 4/4. And that's the end of the Marisi player's turn. We draw a land for turn. Okay, well I still really want to draw cards, so let's tempt our opponents here. I'm going to move straight to combat. I'll send our Ninja at Marisi. And then I'll offer the trade with our fellow Ur-Dragon player. That triggers Norin. And fortunately neither of our opponents block, so the damage is going to go through. We get 2 triggers from our Ingenious Infiltrator. Let's hopefully draw something good. A land and a Heronblade Elite. Well, the Heronblade Elite is what I wanted to see. So we can start accelerating into our mana a little bit. So now in our second main phase, we're going to get down our Heronblade Elite. Then we'll play our Overgrown Tomb. We'll take the 2 life. Because we want to play our Guardian Gladewalker and start getting some counters on Heronblade Elite. So it can tap for a lot of mana. Now that does trigger Heronblade Elite and Guardian Gladewalker. The Guardian Gladewalker, we're going to put a 1/1 counter onto our Heronblade Elite. So a nice bit of extra synergy there. And then Heronblade Elite itself also triggers. So it's going to get 2 1/1 counters. And then I think we just leave it there. Norin triggers on our end step. It comes back to the battlefield. It triggers their Bloodline Pretender. And now we move to the Ur-Dragon player's turn. They start by playing a land for turn. And now they cast a Changeling Outcast. A nice little evasive Changeling. That triggers Norin. And it also triggers their Path of Ancestry. Then they move to their end step. Norin triggers. Which then triggers their Bloodline Pretender. And we move to the Norin player's turn. They play a land for turn. And now they cast Desperate Ritual. Add 3 red mana. That triggers their commander. So now they have 3 red mana in their mana pool. Let's see what they plan to spend it on. And they cast a Kiki Jiki Mirror Breaker. Haste, tap it, create a token that's a copy of target non-legendary creature you control except it has haste, sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. Now they tap Kiki Jiki, targeting Bloodline Pretender. They make a copy of it. That also triggers their original Bloodline Pretender. So now it's a beefy 7/7. Then they move to combat. They send their clone copy in at the other Ur-Dragon player. They decide to take the damage. Then Norin moves to end step. That triggers their Kiki Jiki and their Norin. So Norin returns. That triggers Bloodline Pretender. And then the token that Kiki Jiki makes is now exiled. And that's it for them. Marisi plays a land for turn. A Yavimaya Hollow, so it can regenerate a target creature. And now they cast Toski, Bearer of Secrets. It can't be countered, has indestructible, and it attacks each combat if able. And whenever a creature they control deals damage to a player, they get to draw a card. Now let's see if they move to combat and swing with the pest tokens, or they just keep them up as blockers. It looks like they've decided to keep them as blockers. They move to their end step. Norin moves back to the battlefield again. That triggers Bloodline Pretender. And that's the end of their turn. We unfortunately draw another land for turn. We'd really like to see some of our other tribal lords here. Now I don't think we have any good attacks on the Norin player or the Marisi player. We may be able to get in with some combat damage for the Ur-Dragon player. If we possibly risk making a bit of a trade-off with creatures. But I think we need to, because the cards in our hand at the moment aren't much. We just have a lot of changelings and not much else going on. We also don't have the ability to get down the Ur-Dragon this turn. But next turn it is a good possibility if we hold on to our Heronblade Elite. So let's test the Ur-Dragon player once again. We'll send in our Imposter, as well as our Guardian Gladewalker. Because I think they may want to hold on to their changelings just like us to make sure they get most of the value from it. That does trigger Norin. It exiles itself away. And they don't block, fortunately. That triggers our Ingenious Infiltrator twice. Let's hopefully draw something good. A Hoffrey Ghostforge. Well, at least that's board wipe protection. And a Prosperous Thief. Okay, and that's mana generation. Not bad draws at all. Not bad at all. Okay, well, we have quite a few choices in our second main phase now. Well, let's start by getting down our Amoeboid Changeling. That will trigger our Heronblade Elite. It'll get a +1/+1 counter. Then we'll play our Hallowed Fountain for turn. We'll pay the 2 life. We'll cast our Irregular Cohort to get quite a few bodies down on board. That triggers Heronblade Elite. Then when an Irregular Cohort ETBs, it makes a token, which then triggers Heronblade Elite again. So now our Heronblade Elite is a 6/6, and it also taps for 6 mana. So from here now, we'll tap to add X white mana. So we have 6 mana floating. We'll tap for a red, and then we'll cast Hoffrey. And then we'll finish off by casting our Avian Changeling. And so now that's given us quite a board state. That triggers Heronblade Elite again. And I think after that, we can just leave the turn there. Feeling relatively safe, now that if a board wipe does come down, we will get all of our creatures back. Norin re-enters on the end step, and that triggers the Bloodline Pretender. Ur-Dragon starts by playing a land for turn. And now they cast Lathliss Dragon Queen. That triggers Norin, as well as triggers their Path of Ancestry. Lathra says, whenever another non-token dragon enters the battlefield under your control, make a 5/5 red dragon creature token with flying, and you can pay 1 and a red as many times as you like, so that dragons you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. But after that, they just move to their end step. That triggers Norin. He re-enters the battlefield, triggering Bloodline Pretender once again. It's now an 11/11, and we can move to the Norin player's turn now. Norin plays a land for turn. And now they cast a very scary card in Perforos, God of the Forge, that triggers their commander. Perforos has indestructible. As long as its devotion to red is less than 5, it isn't a creature. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Perforos deals 2 damage to each opponent. And for 3 mana, you can give creatures you control +1/+0 until end of turn. So with Norin flickering in and out of the battlefield every turn, that's going to start to lower our life totals pretty quickly. Now let's see if they move to combat or they just hold back blockers. If they do swing in here, we're definitely going to be blocking that, because 11 damage is way too much to take, especially with Perforos on the battlefield now. But it looks like they just passed through combat. They move to their end step, that triggers Norin. And now the clock truly begins. When Norin ETBs, it triggers Perforos and their Bloodline Pretender. So we each take 2 damage, and the Bloodline Pretender gets another +1/+1 counter. And that's it for their turn. Marisi plays a tap land for turn. Now they move to combat. Toski swings over our way, that triggers Norin. He exiles himself. We'll just block with our regular cohort. Then they move straight to their end step and Norin triggers. It re-enters the battlefield, triggering Bloodline Pretender and Perforos once again. And now it moves to our turn. And we draw a Necro Duality for turn. Well, that would have been really great earlier when we had all those changelings in our hand. Well, I think this is the turn we go for our commander, so we can draw a lot of cards and hopefully put a very powerful permanent into play. So we'll play our Path of Ancestry for turn, because it enters the battlefield tapped. And let's see if we can resolve our commander and keep it on the battlefield during combat. So we'll tap down our Heronblade Elite. So we cast our commander, that triggers Norin. It does enter the battlefield. Then we'll move to combat. We will swing our Avian Changeling over at Marisi because it won't be able to be blocked. And because we don't have a lot of good attackers on the Ur-Dragon player or the Norin player with that big blocker, unfortunately we're going to have to send everything in at Marisi. Well, not everything, but a good amount. That triggers our commander. And we draw quite a few cards there. One of them notably being Liliana's Contract, so if we can get to our next upkeep and keep our board, we'll actually win the game. And you know what? I think that's going to be an absolutely awesome way to try to win the game. All eyes are going to turn on us very quickly, but that's what we're here for, so let's give it a go. Let's see if we can win the game using Liliana's Contract. Now that ETBs, we lose 4 life and draw 4 cards. And we do get a Maskwood Nexus there, which is really good. They decide not to block at all here, which is pretty dangerous with a Norin player at the table. Now we have 5 triggers from our Ingenious Infiltrator. We draw a Changeling, a land, another Changeling, Harmonic Sliver, and another land. Now moving to our second main phase, we have 1 mana available to us. I think we will just get down our Changeling. That triggers our Heronblade Elite. Then we move to our end step, Norin triggers. It enters the battlefield once again, triggering Bloodline Pretender and Perforos. Now we will move to discard, and we're going to discard quite a few lands here. And now let's see if we can survive to our next turn, because the heat is going to be on, that's for sure. The Ur-Dragon starts by casting Bident of Thassa, which triggers Norin. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card, and for 1 and a blue, you can tap it. Creatures your opponents control attack this turn if able. Now they move to combat. They swing their Lathlas at the Norin player and their Changeling Outcast. So it looks like they're trying to dig for answers. The Norin player takes the damage. That triggers Bident of Thassa twice. So now they'll draw 2 cards. And with 1 green mana up, there is a chance they could draw into something like a Nature's Claim to take care of Liliana's Contract. Let's just hope that's not the case. They play a land for turn. Then they move to their end step. That triggers Norin, which also triggers Perforos and Bloodline Pretender. So that brings us down to 19. And the Pretender's up to a 15-15. And now we move to the Norin player's turn. And the Norin player actually scoops there. So it looks like they didn't find an answer and they don't want to see what happens when you make a deal with the devil. Now there was every chance that the Marisi player may have had artifact removal because they are in green. That is a color that can notoriously very easily deal with artifacts and enchantments. And it looks like they scooped there. Well, it looks like we did it. We did it with Liliana's Contract. So we move to our upkeep. Liliana's Contract triggers and we win the game. Well, let's go to the review, guys, and discuss what happened. Well, I gotta say, I'm really happy I was able to capture that Liliana's Contract win on video. I've only ever won with it twice in paper, because every other time I've cast it, I've never survived before I reached my next upkeep. But overall, that game went really well for us. We were able to set up a strong card draw engine by landing that Ingenious Infiltrator early, and that allowed us to draw into our Heronblade Elite, which then accelerated our mana. Of all our opponents, it was really only the Norin player that started to become a threat once they resolved their Perforos, And truth be told, if the game had gone on for a few more turns, we may have been in big trouble, especially considering where our life total was at. But once we were able to resolve our Ur-Dragon and then cheat in that Liliana's contract, our opponent simply couldn't find an answer in time and we won the game. Well, that's it from me today. I hope you enjoyed seeing the Ur-Dragon in action and got a kick out of seeing a Liliana's contract win. Until next time, guys.